Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. In this episode, I had a chance to catch up with Eric Wessinger. Eric is the president of Richard Supply, an industrial construction distributor based in Waco, Texas. I've known Eric for several years, and I appreciate his analytical approach to challenges in the business. I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you will too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Another thing I like about this company is they do it all in-house. They take on these applications and build them into the platform using state-of-the-art Microsoft technology. No third-party bolt-ons for them. This is important because when you need technical assistance, they are the single point of contact. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. Hey, Eric, thanks for coming on the show. Welcome to Distribution Talk.
Hey, great, Jason. I appreciate the invitation. Look forward to it.
As always, we like to find out, a little bit about your background, how you got involved with, the company, how you got involved in the business, and how'd you get into distribution?
Right. So Richard Supply has been in our family business for a long time. We bought the business back in the mid-'80s. So I grew up in the industry, literally. It was my summer jobs and my, punishments and all that fun stuff was working in the warehouse. So I grew up in the business and then went away to college in Arizona and kind of started my own life and doing my own thing for a while and lived out in Arizona in another world. I was working in the headhunting, professional staffing industry for a long time, almost a decade. And then my dad decided to expand Richards into the Dallas-Fort Worth market. And we had been talking on and off, for a number of years about me coming back home and joining the business and everything. And it just never really quite was a fit until it was a fit. So when we expanded the business into North Texas, then moved back with the family and jumped right in. And, we had made an acquisition of a business up in Fort Worth. So took in and managed that transition from the incumbent company into Richards. So everybody in that store, we were all kind of learning Richards for the beginning altogether. So it was a good fit, a good match. And then just over the last 10 years have progressed up through the company and became company president a few years back and took over overall operations and management of the business about a year ago.
You and I have talked about this in the past about that transition between, that first generation, second generation, and there's always those, questions. And I don't want to emphasize conflicts, but there are occasional conflicts between first and second generation about how things should be done. But I think it's extremely valuable, the time you spent away in Arizona, working for somebody else. And this is something I tend to encourage pretty heavily with that first and second generation transition, is that the second generation or next generation in multi-generational companies really needs to go away for a little while. And you were gone for 10 years, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So you had quite a while to go and find yourself and figure out what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it was 10 years professionally, and then I was in college before that. So it was probably, between leaving home for school and coming back was close to 15 years. So it was a pretty good adventure.
That's really important for next generationers to come in. If you go and work for somebody else away from the family business, whether you decide to come back or not, I think there's this confidence builder, that you can say, hey, you know what, all things considered, I can go out and make my own way. I don't necessarily need to come back into the family business, but it's there if I want to come back. If you do that, it's on your terms.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A big part of it for me was just trying to figure out what I was interested in and what I was good at, and trying to develop my own personal skills and kind of develop my own personality and develop my own kind of way to feel that confidence that you talk about being able to support myself and do it on my own. And I worked for 2 or 3 different companies while I was there. So you're also finding professional mentors that are someone other than your father or, another family member, and learning just different ways of handling yourself professionally and different ways of doing your job the right way. And then taking little pieces from everybody that you interact with and kind of building your own methodology, I guess, and then being able to bring that home. And what was great for me was, when Dad and I had really started talking about me coming back to Richards, I found that a lot of that kind of fundamental methodology was very similar to what I had established for myself anyway. So I think it all kind of comes full circle to where, when we started having real conversations about how that transition would work, both for me and the company, we found that it was pretty easy because we both had very similar ways of looking at professional life and how to handle and take care of customers and how to work with employees and people that your coworkers. And so it's at the end of the day, it ended up being a pretty smooth transition.
It's interesting. A lot of next generationers are always, they enter that family business or they re-enter it from maybe going away or doing something professionally elsewhere or college or whatever it may be. A lot of them struggle with finding their mark, trying to make their mark on the organization, especially if the first generation was the start, they have this entrepreneurial mark and, they started the business, they started to build the business. And as a second generation coming in, it's sometimes difficult to find, hey, where am I going to make my impact? What is that point of impact? And so from your experience in the high-tech recruiting side, where do you think you've kind of made your mark? Where's that kind of sweet spot so far for you?
I think for me, some of the big transitions we've made is really kind of taking the company from what I guess I would call a back-end side of things into the next generation. And so when I came on board at Richards, we were using the same ERP system we had been using. The website was great for where we were at the time, but needed a ton of work. Coming in at the same time as bringing in the Fort Worth operation was a huge way for me to establish myself as a leader and someone of responsibility in the company, is being able to say, hey, look, this Fort Worth thing is mine and I can help it grow and work that transition. So that was probably a big part of it, to get that Fort Worth operation integrated into Richards, where I could hand that off to someone else to manage and then kind of get more involved with the company as a whole, but still kind of have that feather in my cap of, we got this transition done. This store is operational. It's fitting in great with everything. It's productive and successful and profitable. So, let me take what I've learned over the past 3 or 4 years and try to now expand my knowledge across the company, but really try to look at what we're doing operationally and how we can move Richards forward. So that started with an ERP upgrade, a website upgrade, and really trying to look at the sales team and trying to kind of maybe change the way we look at helping customers as well.
Well, speaking of that, a great segue there. One of the things you and I had talked about previously was, what does that future sales force look like? I mean, the traditional model, of course, is we throw people out in the field. They head off to these different customer sites, whether it's the construction world, new construction, whether it's plant maintenance or whatnot. But that's something that you all have been kind of struggling with and really, top of mind working on, is where does this new sales team fit?
Yeah, it's the $1 million topic that we talk about a ton, both with the leadership and the management team, and then just trying to work with our outside and inside sales force to try to figure out, what does our delivery to customers look like moving forward? It's not just us. When I talk to peer networks that I'm involved with or other people that I know within the industry, we always come back to this topic of, what's the future of sales? It's been a big thing for us, and trying to determine what are the options, then also working with, the parameters of being a small to medium-sized business and maybe not having the capital funds available to us that the nationals do, trying to figure out how do we get the most bang for our buck while at the same time taking care of customers and trying to grow business. So it's a massive challenge. It's exciting and it's fun, but it's definitely something that it's not a snap of the fingers kind of thing.
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of, I'd say a lot of options to consider.
Yeah, it's changing. And so we've got to be able to be adaptable and flexible and try to come up with, how do we do something new, but stay true to our core values and our guiding principles and who we are as a company. And we've been around for 85 years. So we're doing something right already. So how do we take that foundation and move it forward?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's really important to remember that. Where did you come from? And that's right. Really part of that core value moving forward. Are you seeing a bigger reliance now on your inside sales team, or is outside sales really tend to be still the dominant go-to-market method?
That's a great question. So in my opinion, I think outside sales and face-to-face relationships is still a differentiator for us. whereas the nationals are putting a really strong push towards vending and less feet on the street and more call centers and more online sales. For us, I think it's very important that we still have that presence where we can walk into a customer facility and say, hey, how can we help? What changes is that not all customers want that. And so for us, it's very important that we're communicating with our customers and talking with them about these kind of things and say, hey, how do you want to interact with us? What does good partnership and what does service look like to you? And then listen to what they say and be able to adjust and customize our service around each customer and what they want individually. If you looked at our top 50, top 100 customers, we do business with each one of them very differently. And so I think that's been a strength for us through this transition, is being able to ask the right questions and listen to the answers and try to adjust accordingly.
In my opinion, the way of the future is that customization, is that really listening to that customer, the voice of the customer. How do we capture that information, which is not easy. I mean, there's some serious legwork that you have to do in order to try to gather that information, but you've got to learn to ask those right questions. How do you want to be served? And then be willing to make the investment. I'm going to do that going forward.
This is one thing I learned in my early days in recruiting, is never ask a question that you don't want the answer to.
Yeah, definitely.
If you ask a customer how they want to be served, you better be ready to say yes to whatever the answer to that question is.
So here comes the drones, man.
That's right. You got to be ready. So, this whole thing is, everything is easier said than done, right? Some customers are very responsive to those types of inquiries. And in all honesty, Jason, some customers don't really know what they want. And so we've got to be able to make suggestions and do those kind of things. But it's been a huge push for us over the past 2 to 3 years, is this idea of this omni-channel service options, where it's customer likes having an outside salesperson and account manager visit them weekly or monthly, then hey, we've got that for you. If you don't like that and you just want to deal with a inside sales or customer support person, hey, we've got that too. And guess what? We've got a counter and retail desk if you want to send your guys over to pick stuff up. And we've got a really great website with all types of modern features on it that if you just want to order online, that's great too. So that's been the big push for us, to make sure that we're in each one of those segments, is that we're the best we can be.
So speaking of that, I'm glad you brought up the website. That's been kind of a big initiative for you all, is to really revamp that e-commerce website. Go ahead, and if you wouldn't mind, just tell me a little bit about that evolution, how you all have approached that and what lessons you've learned from that.
That was one thing that my dad was on top of 20 years ago. We've had a website for a long time. And it's been something that just over the years we've continued to develop and build on. We knew we needed one, and we knew we wanted it to work and be functional, but we weren't ever really sure what the long-term goal for the website was. And so I was at an industry event through affiliated distributors, and this is about 5 years ago, when we started talking about doing a major upgrade on the website and getting it to where it'd be a little bit more functional. And so I was talking to a number of really smart people in our industry and asking them about their websites. And someone had asked me a question that really kind of shook me to the core, which in that question was, hey, you have to consider your website as a extension of your business, basically as a branch. And you would never open a branch without someone to manage it. And you would never open a branch without inventory in mind, or a sales methodology, or a plan. And it really kind of caught me by surprise, because that's really what we were doing, is we were running this extension, this branch of our company, with no management and very little focus on content and inventory and those kind of things. And so, it was basically me and a couple other people working on it in our spare time, from running the company. And so that was when we decided to make the investment and go out and find a e-commerce manager who could come in and take complete ownership over the site and really try to get out and turn it into something special. And we had recently done a big design to make it responsive and kind of make it a little bit more user-friendly. And then we got really lucky and found a great guy that has come in and really taken it and run with it and turned it into something that we're all really proud of. And it's just a continual thing, is that we're always looking at it now as a big kind of focus for us moving forward, is how do we continue to improve that outlet for our customers and make it into a tool that's easy for them to use, and then how can we use it internally to, maybe make our sales team's job a little bit easier as well.
It's a great thought and comment about it really being a branch of your organization. And the more successful people I've seen that have gone into the e-commerce world, it really is a different animal. And it really needs to be thought of differently. So having someone who is hyper focused on that and the strategy, the inventory, the look and feel, all of that has to come into play when you're going down this e-commerce path.
No doubt. It's a whole different thing. And so we wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are today if we had no brought in someone to fill that role and fill that capacity. Sometimes you get lucky and you find the right people, and it's been great having, his name's Matt, and he's just been fantastic for what we're trying to do. Our revenue coming through the website has more than doubled in the last 18 months. We're adding new customers. Every month we're getting our sales team to utilize it more as a sales tool, and we're using it for vendor managed inventory. We're using it for order tracking. We're using it for a lot of things that, a year ago were on the wish list and would like to have kind of things. And so it's moving forward, which is great. So just continue to try to build on it as much as we can.
I know this might be a little bit difficult to speculate, but if you could look out 2 to 3 years, what percentage of your revenue do you think that e-commerce is going to take up?
From where it is today, if we could get it into that 10% range, I think would be fantastic. We're still in kind of low single digits at this point. I guess as long as customers are happy using it, the higher that percentage, the better. Because it does free up our staff to be able to do other things from a support standpoint, which is either sourcing product or quote and order entry and these kind of things. An example is that we've got a customer that we do vendor managed inventory for once a week, and we had this 4-step order entry process that between the account manager and the inside salesperson was taking them, multiple hours every week, not to mention the warehouse staff and, having to react quickly to order entry and those kind of things. And over the past 3 months, we've been able to completely automate that system through the website, and the account manager still spends some time entering orders through the website, but it doesn't even touch our inside sales desk now. It goes straight to the warehouse, and so we've been able to free up hours per week for that inside salesperson to be able to support other customers or to kind of turn the wheel a little bit faster on other orders and those kind of things. So if you told me 3 to 5 years from now that we were able to do that more often, then I would love it. 10-15% of revenue coming through the site would be great.
Sure. No, and I think that's a very realistic goal. I mean, there's some folks that I think they get their, pie in the sky ideals, like it's going to be 50% of my revenue or it's going to be this. And I just don't see it. And maybe that's me being naive. And obviously it's also the industry that you serve. But in the business, that Richards is in, I don't know if I see it getting to that, 50% or, maybe 30% someday, but I just don't see it being the majority.
No, I would think richardsupply.com would never be that high. Our core business, I think, is always going to be more relationship driven than electronically driven. But if we were to open a secondary web store or something that's a little bit more e-commerce focused, which, an example would be like Grainger.com versus Zorro, if we were able to create a secondary brand or a secondary site that is 100% e-commerce driven, then that would be something in a different kind of conversation. But I think as far as richardsupply.com and the way we use it, we're really gearing it towards existing customers. We're really not pushing, we're not that interested, in all honesty, with, selling a drill to someone in Kansas City. So we're, trying to gear the features and the benefits around existing customers and how they can utilize it as a tool to support themselves or to work through us.
Before I move on to another subject, one of the things I've heard from other people is that they've been able to maintain margins on the e-commerce traffic, versus, sometimes when we allow a lot of human intervention, sometimes we get a little margin slippage, if you will. So Has that been your experience?
Yeah, our margins are holding steady. The website ties directly into our ERP system. So, if a customer has negotiated pricing or contracts on specific items, as long as they're logged in when they place their orders, then that pricing bleeds through the website. Where we've been able to kind of grow business is that if a customer comes on to place an order for the product that they're always buying from us, maybe they're adding some things to their cart that they hadn't bought previously. And so that helps with that margin maintenance. But overall, we really haven't seen much bleed coming through. We've been able to maintain.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's one of those benefits that a lot of people don't recognize or realize is that you can do so much in the way of holding your margins to the matrix that you've created, but also the ability to add to cart those accessory items, the go-together items that you wish that your counter people or inside people would always ask about, but your machine will always ask about. And so, yeah, there is some benefit there.
Yeah, you push things through the homepage, and we're dipping our toes into email marketing and those kind of things to try to drive customers to the site and to try to drive them to specific categories where maybe we can be a little bit more aggressive through pricing. But it's been a good experiment. We're always trying to come up with new fun things.
If I could take a quick segue, one of the things that you had mentioned is that this kind of technology does alleviate hours in process. And one of the things that's been very difficult for a lot of companies these days is finding people. Obviously, this comes back to your recruiting world, your background. Tell me a little bit about the process. What's worked for you all? Or if you're still struggling, if that's something that's been a huge challenge.
Oh, it's definitely a huge challenge trying to find people to fill current openings, try to build pipelines for future openings, trying to find the right people and people that are a fit for us and that we're a fit for them is a constant challenge. I'd like to think that my recruiting background helps in that a little bit and being able to look at alternative sources and interview, but I've still got some big misses on my resume that I thought, hey, this person's going to be a great fit. And they get in and it's just not. Even if you go through the process, it's hard to really determine who's going to be a fit and who's not until you get them in and see how they interact with their coworkers and fit in with the culture of the company. I learned pretty quickly through recruiting is a philosophy of you hire slowly. Don't be in a hurry to bring somebody on and to make sure that you're doing your due diligence to ask all the right questions ahead of time, because once they get on board, it's hard to ask questions once they've already got the job.
In that interviewing phase, I mean, you're saying, hiring slowly. So I'm assuming that means maybe 1 or 2 interviews, different people involved, and sometimes employee testing. Is that something you've gotten involved with as well?
Sure. So we do a little bit of all of that. Something that I learned from you when we started working together years back was that you've got to know what you're looking for, right? And map out a skill set and a key skill set checklist style for each position. And so that's usually where we start. So if we're looking for a delivery driver, which we'd like to hire 2 more today, if you know anybody, what we've done is we've kind of established a core skill set of what we look for in our delivery drivers. And so the warehouse managers have those lists as they're going down and looking at candidates, and attention to detail, clean driving record, patience, customer service. So these things that we look for, that we know that a successful delivery driver at Richards has these key components to their skill set that has made them successful, and the guys who don't have those components typically don't work out. So we have a documented core skill set that we try to have on when we start looking for candidates. And then as we go through a resume, we try to see maybe where in their experience or in their past where they've maybe exhibited some of those core skills. And then we usually start with a delivery driver or some of the entry level positions. We'll have them just come in, meet with the department head, and then we kind of walk through a resume and we'll talk about specific job experiences, but we try to steer our questions around those core competencies that we're looking for. And so if attention to detail is one of those, what questions can we ask of this person about their experience and their background that would highlight their ability to pay attention, and take pride in what they're doing. If they're pulling an order, how can we determine if they're going to, take the time to do it right? So that's a part of it. Again, it's easier said than done. That's where we start. And then depending on the position, we would have multiple interviews. Typically, if in inside sales or counter sales or office staff or those kind of things, if they're going to have daily interactions with other departments or other managers, then we'll get those managers involved in the interview process as well. Everybody kind of takes a different approach to the way they interview, but we always kind of come back to those core values that we're looking for.
That's something that I think a lot of folks don't take the time to do, is to really write out what are the things that make a good delivery driver. What are those core fundamentals, and what are those skills that are going to have to be either acquired or come in with? And then again, try to match up and do the very best to do that.
Yeah. And then we always try to look internally as a first step. Who do we have in the company today that might be a fit for any opening that we have? And so that's another place where that key skill comes into play. If we've got a sales or a purchasing or an accounting position open, is there anybody in the warehouse that exhibits the core skills of a counter salesperson? Or is there anyone in purchasing that exhibits the core skills of an accounts receivable person? So we try to look inside the company first to kind of say, hey, I know you're in the warehouse today, but would you be interested in moving up to the counter? And here's why we think you'd be a fit. And so some of our best people that have been with us for a long time have worn multiple hats and have sat in multiple chairs and done different things with us. And so that's important for us. When we don't have those internal resources, then we try to look outside the company, and we'll do that through job postings. And believe it or not, we still put ads in the paper. And there's been times where we've put openings out on the marquee if we're having a really hard time. Internal referrals is a huge thing for us, and we usually buy somebody lunch or do something small for them if they're able to refer somebody to us. But I think one thing we've learned recently, especially on the sales side, is not to get too caught up in, do they have industrial supply experience? Something in the past we've always, they don't come from our world, so they're not going to be a fit. And we've had to get away from that mentality pretty quickly, because it's same thing as everything else. Most of the good people are working, and if someone tried to take one of our salespeople, I would never let them. I would do whatever I could to keep that person. And we've found that to be the same industry-wide, at least in our local geographies. So we've had to really kind of broaden our horizons to say, well, what other industries are out there that might have these same core competencies and these same core skills, that all we need to do is teach them our language, but they've already got this fundamental skill set that they could bring to the table, and then they try to make that learning curve as level as possible so we can get them up and running. We've had to broaden our perspectives and try to really kind of look outside of our own world to find good people.
Good. Well, Eric, I hate to do this, man, because we're kind of, deep in here, but, I've got to draw this thing to a close. But anyway, hey, I really appreciate your time today.
That's great. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And, we've been friends for a long time, so it's good catching up with you and talking shop a little bit. So yeah,
absolutely.
Anytime I'm here.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.